Hello, I'm Dr. Dorninger, and this is CBD 101, an overview of Cannabidiol. I am the Director of Research and Development for Blue Sky CBD. I am a naturopathic doctor, Bastyr University, licensed acupuncturist, and founder and owner of Roots and Branches Integrative Healthcare, a clinic in Louisville, Colorado, dedicated to solving and resolving chronic illness for those suffering without answers. You can also find us on our podcast, The Vitality Hour, where we address misinformation and try and offer people the best and latest in integrative health. I also do functional medicine training for Apex nutraceuticals providers and am the co-founder of CIRS-X, a conference dedicated to those suffering with chronic inflammatory response syndrome. Today we're going to take a stroll down memory lane and talk about endogenous cannabinoids versus cannabidiol versus full-spectrum hemp and THC, and how to clinically apply these molecules for health and healing. So a quick review of endogenous cannabinoids. Endogenous cannabinoids are self-made cannabinoids. Anandamide and 2-arachidonoglycerol are examples of our body's self-made endogenous cannabinoids synthesized from fat on our cell membrane. The two cannabinoids are broken down by fatty acid, amide, hydrolase, and MAGL, monoacylglycerol lipase, respectively. So basically, you make these endogenous cannabinoids for pain, inflammation, stress, overwhelm, circadian rhythms, and to feel good. And then they eventually get broken down by these enzymes so that you run out of them. Palmitoethanolamide, also known as PEA, and oleoethanolamide are endogenous cannabinoids with similar synthesis and breakdown mechanisms, but bind to very special receptors, TRPV1 and PPAR-alpha receptors. Palmitoyl, so if you get healthy raised palm oil or extra virgin olive oil, those fats are going to downstream into PEA and OEA, and they do not interact with the CB1 and CB2 receptors you traditionally hear about with CBD and THC. They have their own mechanisms of neuroendocrine immune modulation, and this is one of the reasons healthy fats and things like the Mediterranean diet have anti-inflammatory benefit. Endogenous cannabinoids are neuroendocrine immune modulating agents that balance physiology through affecting the CB1, CB2 receptors and other pathways throughout the body. So what we're saying here is there's three bosses in the body: your brain, central and peripheral nervous system, your endocrine system, which is any gland that releases a hormone, and your immune system. And these three bosses have to play nicely as three CEOs in your body physiology and work and run smoothly together. Endogenous cannabinoids really help bridge the gap through that relationship of brain, endocrine, and immune system, also known as the neuroendocrine immune. Although exercise and dance increase endogenous cannabinoids, a small pilot trial showed singing has the greatest full-spectrum elevation of endogenous cannabinoids. And this is why during COVID, we were so nervous about people losing their gyms, people not going to church choir, non-denominational choirs, getting together, making music, bringing out the banjo, and also just hanging out and moving your body, because you will make your own endogenous cannabinoids through movement if you have adequate healthy fats as a raw material to make those from. And I had an old student that used to say, God wants me to smoke pot. I have endogenous cannabinoid receptors. And I said, yeah, and you make endogenous cannabinoids. But then you can also bring in plant cannabinoids known as phytocannabinoids that also can bind those receptors. So these are your endogenous cannabinoids, your self-made ones. This is why a ketogenic diet and healthy carnivore, where you're using grass-fed, till-slaughtered chicken and pork type meats with healthy fats, will help contribute. Olive oil, healthy palm oil can downstream into these endogenous cannabinoids. But you can use them up when it comes to stress and migraines and headaches and fatigue and insomnia and musculoskeletal issues and Parkinson's and arthritis and MS and anything that's neuroinflammatory or body inflammatory or traumatizing to your nervous system will eventually deplete those endogenous cannabinoids. And there is a phenomenon called endogenous cannabinoid deficiency syndrome. And that's where CBD can help come in and prop up your endogenous cannabinoids and also have its own benefit, its own binding and effect, a 2-for-1 special on recycling those endogenous, but also having its own neuroendocrine immune modulating properties. So cannabidiol, also known as CBD, is not an endogenous cannabinoid. It is an exogenous or outside cannabinoid found in cannabis that modulates those endocannabinoids, the AEA, the PEA, and the OEA. So it helps prop up all of those other endogenous cannabinoids, but it also has its own direct benefits. CBD is a novel neuroendocrine immune modulating anti-inflammatory, and this is so important in the land of the triathlete in Boulder here, where people will do 1,200 milligrams a day every weekend as a weekend warrior, as a triathlete, or someone who has chronic migraines or chronic musculoskeletal pain. And a little bit of nonsteroidal anti-inflammatories like Advil, Aleve, and Tylenol are going to destroy your liver, kidney, and intestinal lining. But when you're going to that well over and over and over again, these are the long-term consequences laid out by those meds. And you need to find alternative methods to help modulate day-to-day inflammation. And we love CBD as a novel anti-inflammatory. CBD is an endocannabinoid promoter. And again, that means it's going to help your body make and keep around those self-made endogenous cannabinoids. And it's isolated from the hemp plant. The hemp plant has high levels of cannabidiol or CBD, but could technically be isolated from marijuana as well, which has lower levels of CBD. So hemp and THC-laden cannabis both have CBD, but the industry is extracting CBD more out of hemp because of the higher concentrations of CBD. CBD is a safe alternative to many over-the-counter and prescriptive anti-inflammatories, and we love this because, again, I don't hate Advil. I would put it in the water if it didn't wreck your kidneys, liver, and intestinal lining eventually. So when you have people who start going to the well of NSAIDs every day, we need to find alternatives for these patients in public. CBD is not THC, although some CBD hemp products are contaminated with THC. In 2018, the United States Farm Bill classified hemp as 0.3% THC or less. Legally sold CBD products in the U.S. are derived from hemp. So a lot of companies might have accidentally more than 0.3% THC, and you can get a psychoactive effect and intoxication off THC if you're a real cheap date when it comes to THC off 0.3% or less. So CBD does not have THC. Hemp has THC and should be standardized below 0.3%, and products that were pulled off the shelf are variable. CBD is not intoxicating and does not get you high, but does have beneficial psychoactive effects. So this drives me crazy because people will say CBD does not have psychoactive effects, and I am going to show you slide after slide that says, yes, they have very potent, beautiful effects of enthusiasm and ambition and drive and feeling cool, calm, and collected through serotonin, dopamine, and GABA receptors. However, it's not intoxicating. So you feel an uplift, but not a high from pure cannabidiol. CBD does not show the safety concerns of liver, more on the damning mouse paper later. There was a paper that came out of Arkansas that really hammered mice with radically high doses of CBD, and they did see some liver enzyme stuff. In my experience of close to 5 years now applying low dose, medium dose, and high dose cannabidiol, we see a very occasional liver enzyme very similar to traditional nutraceuticals. So in the nutraceutical world, things like niacin can actually raise liver enzymes frequently, and it's mandatory that you rerun liver enzymes 2 weeks after starting niacin. If you're concerned about liver and kidney function, have your doctor run a metabolic panel 2 weeks after starting cannabidiol, and then again at 4 and 6 weeks. Remember, even nutraceuticals can have a transient liver enzyme raise followed by a normalization, and that's just starting something new, versus things like niacin and statins, which can actually raise your liver enzymes, keep them raised. And CMP is a $4 test that you can track or insurance billable for your primary care to make sure you're tolerating any drug or supplement. How does CBD work? Although studies on cell models have reported over 65 distinct molecular targets of cannabidiol, the concentrations needed to affect these pathways are unlikely to occur in human animal models. But what's amazing about this is cannabidiol is a modulator. It hits over 65 regions in the body and modulates and brings things back into balance in that neuroendocrine immune web triangle. So we distill CBD's mechanisms down to 4 major physiological targets: how it hits receptors, ion channels, enzymes, and transporters. And that's what we're going to talk about today. CB1 receptor. Unlike CB1 receptor agonists like THC and anandamide, again, the bliss molecule, is a self-made endogenous cannabinoid. CBD is an indirect antagonist. So we're saying THC binds to the CB1 receptor, and that's what gives you that expansive, light, stoner high effect. And if you go too far, you'll get the paranoia, the fear, schizoaffective disorder, and too expansive. CBD works as a negative allosteric CB1 receptor modulator. By binding to a different part of the receptor, CBD makes THC and anandamide binding less cordial at the CB1 receptor. So let me explain that. A lot of us grew up with marijuana that was low THC and high CBD, and it was very hard to get paranoid and crazy stoned high on that kind of marijuana, because the CBD binds a side receptor that keeps the THC from really hitting the CB1 receptor hard. Then Snoop Dogg and Dre came around and said, let's breed out the CBD, let's breed up the THC, and let's get couch lock, right? Let's get so whacked out. And this is where we're seeing in Boulder County these concerns of schizoaffective disorder, anxiety, OCD, obsessive compulsive, attention deficit, bipolar, and schizophrenia on the worst days, not caused by marijuana, but triggered. It was the final straw that wakes up the overexpression of the CB1 receptor, and now you have a mood disorder patient. So if you're practicing in an area where lots of kids and college kids and adults are overdoing it with gummies and smoking really high THC, dabbing, and so on and so forth, cannabidiol is part of your arsenal, part of your toolbox to kick that excess THC off of the CB1 receptor and bring that person back down to earth. And it is also part of our toolbox for mood disorders like anxiety, obsessive compulsive, ruminating, attention deficit, bipolar, schizophrenic on the worst day. When working with bipolar and schizophrenia, we always work in conjunction with a psychiatrist, and the CBD, as you'll see in future slides, is a wonderful adjunct to mental health. So, historically, intoxicating marijuana was more balanced ratio of THC to CBD. Recreational marijuana users supported the breeding of higher THC marijuana, which breeds out the balancing and other medicinal effects of CBD. And this is why a lot of our patients who are going through things like cancer that does get some benefit of THC, like a high CBD, low THC marijuana for things like pain and nausea and so on and so forth. They want the anti-inflammatory pain benefits of the THC, but they don't want the intoxicating, hallucinatory paranoia effects. So they keep the CBD in their marijuana. What we're saying is Blue Sky completely removes THC, so you have cannabidiol as an isolate molecule, and it can be used to address THC toxicity. CBD stimulates the 5-HT1A receptor. This is a serotonin receptor in the brain. 5-HT1A is the most ubiquitous serotonin receptor in the central nervous system and is a target for several anti-anxiety and antidepressant meds. 5-HT1A activation enhances enthusiasm via improved mental acuity, decreased aggression, increased social gregariousness, decreased impulsivity, and inhibition of drug-seeking behavior, and supports libido and arousal. And I always put references to where we saw these things in animal and human clinical trials. This is one of CBD's most powerful mechanisms for reducing anxiety, and how CBD reduced the damage of brain ischemia stroke-induced mice. So they stroked out these mice and had much better outcomes post-stroke in the mice who got CBD, and a lot of that is this 5-HT1A activity. CBD improved cognition in mice with hepatic encephalopathy. So if you got a really sick liver, you can get things like NH4 ammonia toxicity, and you can hallucinate and be disheveled and totally lose your mind. And CBD can help when we tox mice that way with hepatic encephalopathy. 5-HT1A agonists are shown in the literature to dampen nausea, and this may be responsible for the anti-nausea effects seen with CBD users. One of the most smooth over medicines we use for everything from IBS to inflammatory bowel disease to sucrose isomaltase deficiency to ulcers and anything gastric is pure cannabidiol. And it's because you deplete your endogenous cannabinoids that help that neuroendocrine immune of the gut. Remember, the gut has its own nervous system, it has its own immune system, and it has its own hormones. And when you're constantly stressed with something like Crohn's, you're going to deplete those endogenous cannabinoids trying to keep that gut in balance, and CBD can help bring that back. So CBD is an uplifting productivity molecule, and serotonin is not the happy molecule, it's the enthusiasm molecule. Get into it. Stay engaged with hobbies. Keep doing your art, your athletics, your community, your choir. Don't isolate. COVID took the joy of community and camaraderie out of us all. So it's time to get back out there. And if you're feeling like now you're an anxious isolate, maybe you need the CBD isolate to kind of wake up that enthusiasm and say, I do like pickleball. I do like jiu-jitsu. I do like going backcountry skiing. I do like helping my neighbor out with shoveling her driveway. I do like feeding the homeless. I do like making music. I do like calling my aging parent and checking in on them. Sometimes you need a little 5-HT1A to get that enthusiasm back during chronic illness and even after a societal isolation like COVID. Cannabidiol is a partial agonist at the dopamine 2 receptors. Recent research suggests cannabidiol as the first apparent exception to the general rule that all antipsychotics either block or interfere with dopamine at the brain dopamine D2 receptors. Other papers are suggestive of CBD's ability to deplete glutamate. So this is kind of wild. They took randomized schizophrenics in Germany. About 80 schizophrenics were randomized, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and the ones got a traditional antipsychotic and the twos got 400 to 800 milligrams of cannabidiol, which is a whopping dose. But both stabilized the schizophrenic patient's mood. CBD did it ... with less side effects. So remember, one of the things that happens when you smash glutamate and dopamine with an antipsychotic is now you don't have adequate dopamine for movement, and you can get things like tremors from meds like Seroquel and Abilify, and again, all things that are valid psychiatric medicines, but can come with side effects from smashing the dopamine receptor. I'm making an argument that those prescriptions work more through a glutamate pathway because cannabidiol did just as good of a job as those antipsychotics for stabilizing schizophrenia without smashing dopamine 2. So patients didn't get the side effects of tremors and so on and so forth. I will use 75 to 150 milligrams of cannabidiol with a schizophrenic who's on an antipsychotic and living a balanced life, but they don't like the tremor that the medicine is giving them, and we see dramatic reduction. So we're not anti-prescriptions, particularly in bipolar and schizophrenia. It's important people can maintain jobs and relationships and not, be a burden and risk on the safety of society. But when you smash people down, they can also turn into a lump on a log with movement and motility issues. And that's where cannabidiol can be a nice complement. And with the right psychiatric and integrated medicine providers, can even be a first-line therapy. So dopamine is responsible for ambition and drive, feelings of self-worth, hopelessness, decisiveness, the ability to finish tasks, and part of our libido. So it's so important to recognize dopamine deficiency. And remember, the brain needs oxygen, so you got to screen the body for, do they have apnea or pulmonary hypertension or anemia or chronic emphysema from cigarettes is something undermining dopamine production from lack of oxygen or lack of fuel. But at the end of the day, stress, concussion, Parkinson's, MS, rheumatoid arthritis, these will deplete your body's endogenous cannabinoids and their contribution to dopamine production. And maybe you need to surplus that with some cannabidiol. Adenosine receptors are ubiquitous in the body and modulate cardiac function, inflammation, dopamine, and glutamate effects in the brain. Caffeine inhibits adenosine 1 and 2 receptors, creating caffeine-stimulating effect. And one of the things I'll tell you is you may be able to avoid palpitations if you take a little bit of cannabidiol with your caffeine, because caffeine shuts down these adenosine receptors and can really geek you out a little bit on your heart and mood. So you feel energetic but anxious, energetic but palpatory in your heart. Always evaluate your caffeine addiction, cut back and moderate as appropriate, but it can be a nice adjunct to someone who's, getting ready for the CrossFit Games and really doing 400 milligrams of caffeine a day to improve athletics. So studies suggest CBD stimulates the adenosine receptor, preventing irregular heart rhythm in a rodent model of heart attack. And CBD also stimulates the adenosine 2 receptor, enhancing anti-inflammatory and potentially neuroprotective effects in the mouse model. Stimulation of adenosine results in a calming effect that does not account for CBD's uplifting effects, but may provide a remedy for the caffeine jitters. So what we say about cannabidiol as a personality is it's a cool, calm, collected, uplifting productivity molecule. So it's really like a black belt in martial arts who's very effective but relaxed in the way they move on the mat. So receptor GPR18, this was a new one for me. This is an orphan receptor, which means it doesn't bundle with other receptors in science, and it's a G protein coupled receptor found in humans, rodents, and canines. And many of you have heard of G-coupled proteins because you need to turn those on to heal leaky gut. So things like short-chain fatty acids, things like probiotic can help turn on those G-couple receptors and heal and mend a leaky gut. But cannabidiol is turning on the G-couple protein 18. And these are mostly expressed in testes, spleen, brainstem, and other tissues. So again, a lot of nervous system tissues and endocrine tissues are where you're going to get downstream effects of cannabidiol. So the present study yields new insight into the role of the novel cannabinoid receptor GPR18 in central control of blood pressure. We present the first evidence of RVLM, that's higher center of the brain. GPR18 mediates reduction in oxidative stress, MBP, in conscious rats. So what we're saying here is there's a lot of valuable blood pressure medications out there. If you need to smash blood pressure in the ER, you're going to use a beta blocker like metoprolol. There's a lot of good use of things like ARBs and for things like SIRS for smashing TGF-beta-1 and using losartan for that. But sometimes people do not respond to multiple classes of blood pressure medicines. And CBD has a novel upstream benefit for calming BP, blood pressure, in the rat model. We have blue sky family members, aging parents, whose only response for their blood pressure has come off the blue sky original, and they're at 75 to 150 milligrams a day. When it comes to blood pressure, I like to do 1 dropper full of the CBD original in the morning, 1 dropper full in the evening, so that we can keep a steady state of cannabidiol and keep that blood pressure nice and regulated. Always work with your provider. If you have blood pressure issues, always have a blood pressure cuff. But you can use cannabidiol as a standalone therapy or with your prescriber and, maybe be on losartan and cannabidiol. What's wonderfully unique about this is when you're nervous as a doctor and can't get that blood pressure down and a prescriber is already heavy-handing them with multiple BP meds, obviously diet and lifestyle, obviously industrial seed oils out and the anti-inflammatory oils, and obviously check for the apnea and get the blood sugar stable with vitamin D, fish oil, all those wonderful remedies. still not working, you have this higher center that you can affect through cannabidiol. Neurotransmitter reuptake inhibition. So remember, one brain cell is going to throw out a whole bunch of serotonin or dopamine, etc., and then you wanted binding the other brain cell with enthusiasm and ambition and drive while feeling cool, calm, and collected and focused and attentive. And you don't want to take that neurotransmitter re-up. You just want to leave it there and have it do its effect. And cannabidiol is really wonderful at keeping things in the cleft. So you get increased signaling concentrations of the neurotransmitters that can change the expression of your nervous system. You can literally turn yourself from a nervous Nelly who worries about everything to someone who can get present and literally problem solve and execute, change from a panicked life to an empowered life. We want our patients with chronic illness or just people who feel good but want to push it to feel an empowered, not panicked lifestyle. So the multitude of neurotransmitter inhibition by CBD suggests CBD is a balancing, modulating mood molecule versus more linear acting prescriptive mood medicine. So it really is this more conductor of the symphony of neuroendocrine immune rather than just a tuba player or just a violin. Ion channels. So ion channels, the first time I heard about transient receptor potential channels was using capsaicin cream for pain. And pepper cream for pain is very effective. It works on ion channels and reduces something called substance P, a pain messenger, but it's greasy and intense. It burns. And so a lot of times you get poor compliance on that. But I used to use this on my mom's knees all the time. I'd rub the capsaicin cream and she got really good results, but she wouldn't keep up with it because it was messy and also intense to put on and apply. Cannabidiol is the first thing I've seen that can mimic the effect of the hot pepper cream without the intense side effect of burning. And this works on what's known as the capsaicin receptor or vanilloid receptor 1. And this is a sensory receptor, nociceptor for painful stimuli that increases pain perception. So what happens when you calm this receptor is that you don't get as much of a signal. Now, I always tell people you're going to feel better on cannabidiol and CBG for pain, but you want to get back to, why do I load my knee funny? Why do I sit at a desk for 10 hours a day and code, right? Why don't I take a 10-minute walk every once in a while? Sitting is the new smoking, and we need to honor that. But a lot of times my patients are in too much pain to even do the exercises their PT taught them, or Eric Goodman in foundation training with Jesse and Vicky Hunter and the crew are teaching them to do, or Egoscue's pain-free work. A lot of times they just can't get off the couch and get going. Uplifting the mood, decreasing the inflammation and pain a little bit allows people to get into a biomechanics program that then allows them to move freely with some exercise. So capsaicin and CBD are both reported as TRPV1 agonists in the literature. Prolonged exposure to TRPV1 agonists induces rapid receptor endocytosis and lysosomal degradation in both sensory and recombinant systems. So it just shuts down the signaling of pain, and that's when we get patients to walk through the door and start doing their biomechanics. PPARs. So many of you have heard of PPARs, whether it's the prescriptive drug Actos or fish oil or resveratrol, all these wonderful prescriptive and nutraceutical medicines can address PPAR, but so does cannabidiol. And PPARs have a wide-ranging effect, including inhibition of chemokine expression, that's again inflammatory cytokines, and pain behavior reduction in rat models. Experimental evidence suggests a connection between pain-ameliorating effects of PPAR agonists and suppression of the inflammatory gene expression, including chemokines. So remember, gene expression is called transcription, not do I have an inflammatory pain gene. We all have them. But did I turn that on and start manufacturing pain widgets? And when you hit PPARs with all those therapies I talked about, you will help shut down those factories and stop manufacturing inflammatory expression of pain widgets, pain molecules, pain proteins. So CBD indirectly activates PPAR alpha via the potentiation of anandamide, palmitoethylamide, and oleoethylamide. So one of the things via inhibiting the enzyme that breaks these down. So this is where we're saying, hey, your body's going to make its own endogenous cannabinoids, but cannabidiol helps keep those around, even if you're not eating the amount of olive oil or the amount of tallow or the amount of grass-fed beef till slaughter that you want to eat. But the cleaner your diet, the more you get the industrial seed oils out, the more you get the anti-inflammatory oils in, and layer in the CBD, man, you're cooking with gas. Now you have the substrate or the fat to make into a self-made endogenous cannabinoid. You have the CBD to recycle that self-made anti-inflammatory, and then CBD has its own novel anti-inflammatory pain benefits and also mood. Remember, every single mood disorder known to humans is based in higher levels of neuroinflammation, inflammatory cytokines in the brain than healthy controls. So if you name a mood disorder, whether it's depression or anxiety, obsessive compulsive, ruminating, ADHD, schizophrenia, bipolar, major depressive disorder, you even go into migraines, Parkinson's, ALS, dementia, MS, these are all based in higher inflammatory cytokines than healthy people who are not experiencing those illnesses. And the job is to go inflammation hunting, inflammation killing, and you can do that by addressing endogenous cannabinoid deficiency syndrome and get the extra push of CBD. So that's what this slide really talks about. Look at all these wonderful places that cannabidiol will interrupt chronic inflammatory experiences. And this is a good overview, but it doesn't even cover all the places of neuroendocrine immune modulation. So in summary, when we're applying cannabidiol clinically, I think about it for three major categories. One is mood and having a healthy affect in life. The other is pain, and the other is sleep. And those are the big three that also play off each other. So if you get a poor night's sleep, you don't get melatonin popping with restorative growth hormones flooding the body and creating beauty sleep. Now, beauty sleep prevents sagging and wrinkles, woohoo! But it also restores brain health. It also restores joints and muscle and broken down tissues. So you need a good night's sleep to not be in pain, but you need no pain to be able to get a good night's sleep. And this is where, working at the retirement community for 10 years in the early years of my career, I saw that the seniors' favorite sleep medicine was Advil PM or Tylenol PM, which are anti-inflammatories that take down inflammatory cytokines and allow the body and brain to go into rest. So if you're ending your day full of inflammation, you're not going to cycle melatonin properly to set up a restorative night's sleep. If you're in inflammation all night, you're not going to spike cortisol in the morning and create what's called a circadian rhythm or farmer's hours, where you wake up refreshed with the sun and go to bed with the sun. And this is what we're looking to do. We're looking to break the cycle of sleep issues, pain issues, mood issues, and the common denominator for all of those is inflammatory cytokines. So our product line started out with the Cannabidiol Original, and that is pure CBD with MCT isolate. It is not full spectrum hemp, and all the studies I'm presenting to you are on CBD, cannabidiol. So these are not hemp extract, these are not full spectrum hemp, these are pure cannabidiol studies that show this neuroendocrine immune modulating. There is a suggestion in the medical paper that you need an entourage effect, but there's no studies that show hemp is doing what pure cannabidiol was. We also know with autoimmunity, sometimes those other phytocannabinoids can shift TH1, TH2 the wrong way. So I get really nervous with giving a Hashimoto's patient or a type 1 diabetic or an MS patient or rheumatoid arthritis or a Crohn's patient hemp, because I don't know which way their TH1 is going to spin, whereas cannabidiol is TH1, TH2 neutral. TH1 is more your cytotoxic natural killer cells. TH2 is more your humoral antibody-producing immunity, and in the middle of those is a conductor called TH3, and that's who balances the orchestra of your immune system, and things like fish oil and vitamin D and vitamin K2 and correcting apnea and blood sugar stabilization and probiotics and short-chain fatty acids and glutathione. Those are all TH3, and make sure the conductor is very present in balancing TH1, TH2. Cannabidiol falls into that family. So I have no fear. I have joy applying cannabidiol in some of the most out-of-control, dysregulated immune and inflammatory responses because it's an immune modulator and a potent one. In 20 years of using natural medicine, nutraceutical, and natural products, I've never seen something work as quickly for mood, pain, and or sleep as cannabidiol. If your patient has extreme pain, we have added the Rolls Royce of phytocannabinoids called CBD or cannabidiol. And that shows in the research some other novel mechanisms for pain. So it's a 1 + 1 = 3 when you add CBD, CBG. What's so great about our Max Relief formula is it takes the original CBD and adds 50% CBG. So it's 2/3 CBD, 1/3 CBG, and it's the most potent product I found on the market for CBG with a price point that is as cost effective as you can get. And if a patient's not responding to our original CBD, I then move to the Max Relief. Or if their pain is so severe and they say, I've tried CBD isolate and it did nothing for me, we go right to the Max Relief. Our sleep formula is CBD plus CBN. And we played around with the creation of this sleep formula with some of our most severe insomnia patients. And what we found is a little bit of CBN with the sleep molecule, a little bit of CBD with the sleep molecule CBN was the most effective for helping people fall asleep and stay asleep. And we have a lot of customers as well at Blue Sky who talk about the improvements of their Oura Ring in quality and quantity of sleep. And as always, if you have severe sleep issues, don't forget to track an overnight oximeter and make sure you're not desaturating, choking out with apnea, and make sure you're not dropping out your blood sugar. So that's how we think about this triad, but they all play off each other. If I'm in pain, I usually don't sleep well. If I don't sleep well, I enhance my pain because sleep debt is inflammatory. If you get poor quantity or quality of sleep, you don't bathe your body in the anti-inflammatory self-made growth hormones to heal. And if I can get sleeping, I can also wake up and feel a little bit better and then get some movement and make my endogenous cannabinoids recover. If I need a little bit of joy and ambition and follow through, I always am going to consider the CBD Blue Sky Original, which is just, again, cannabidiol and MCT for things like anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsion, so on and so forth. And then know your limits and your comfort as a provider. If we're taking on bipolar or schizophrenics tendencies in a patient, we always need them to have a psychiatrist as well, and we will communicate and coordinate appropriately there. For low-level anxiety and depression and rumination and attention deficit, the pure cannabidiol has been a wonderful starting place for many customers and patients. So let's talk about, just in the peer-reviewed literature, in the animal line, the cell line, and human line, looking at all that literature, some of the health conditions influenced by endogenous cannabinoids, again, which CBD enhances: acne, addiction, drug cravings, ADD, ADHD, Alzheimer's, anorexia, anxiety, asthma, ataxia, bipolar, brain injury, bone injury, schizophrenia, muscle wasting, cancer, chronic fatigue, chronic pain, cramps, Crohn's disease, diabetes, depression, disc generation, epilepsy, fever, fibro, glaucoma, heart disease, hepatitis, HIV/AIDS, hypertension, incontinence, insomnia, migraine, MRSA, MS, nausea, neuralgia, neuropathy, osteoporosis, Parkinson's, PMS, PTSD, rheumatoid arthritis, seizure disorder, sickle cell anemia, spasms, spinal injury, stroke, Tourette's, and vomiting. What is the unifying factor in every illness that I just read? 95% of them is inflammation. So when we get this neuroendocrine immune web balancing, we get you sleeping, we get you a little uplifted in your mood, and then you go make your endogenous cannabinoids. Now you can follow through on cleaning up the diet a little bit. It really creates the momentum and healing that I haven't experienced as a clinician with anything else natural. So for anxiety, these are a review paper of the clinical trials of pure cannabidiol on anxiety. And one of my favorites is they stimulated these anxiety patients with public speaking. That's kind of mean, but they then randomized them to get a dummy pill or 300 milligrams of cannabidiol. And the cannabidiol takers had statistically significant reduction in anxiety and improved delivery, articulation of their talk. Bone and connective tissue. Osteopenia, osteoporosis is a disease of inflammation, first and foremost. If you help modulate inflammatory cytokines, you're not going to burn your bones down. Remember, estrogen and progesterone are anti-inflammatories. So as you enter menopause, you may want to consider cannabidiol as part of your anti-inflammatory approach to hedge your bets for a reduction in estrogen and progesterone if you're on bioidenticals or a major dropout on that. CBD and pain. So I put this in here because a lot of people said you need THC with CBD for pain, and that is an absolute folklore conversation. You need CBD with THC for pain. So THC alone doesn't do as much for cancer pain as THC with CBD, but CBD as a standalone handles pain just fine, and you can pull these papers and see what we're talking about if you're curious. CBD in Parkinson's really improves the affect on Parkinson's quality of life scores. Now, there is a lot of glory stories at Blue Sky CBD about Parkinson's and our original formula for tremors, the max relief formula for tremors, but this paper was specifically on quality of life, right? Are you feeling as anxious? Are you feeling as stiff and rigid? What is your ability to move and get to a spin class or get to rock steady boxing, so on and so forth. So a lot of times we'll use cannabidiol just to get the Parkinson's patient back into the game. But there is so much exciting human clinical trials coming down the pike with Parkinson's that we will be doing an update on this disease process alone. MS, spasticity, depression, inflammation, pain, and fatigue were reduced in MS patients who were on cannabidiol. Again, with Parkinson's and MS, these heavy-hitting neuroinflammatory disorders, I'm going to start with 75 milligrams of CBD twice a day, but I might go up to 150 milligrams in the morning and evening. Some of my MS patients prefer just to hit a 300 milligram dose about 2-3 hours before bedtime to shut down that inflammation, so they're not so stiff and rigid and spastic in their sleep. When you get down fatigue, pain, inflammation, depression, spasticity, the mobility went up in this clinical trial of CBD on MS patients. So is CBD safe? Yes, if you're getting pure cannabidiol. So in general, the often described favorable safety profile of CBD in humans was confirmed and extended by the reviewed research. The majority of studies were performed for treatment of epilepsy and psychotic disorders. Here, the most commonly reported side effects were tiredness, diarrhea, changes in appetite, and weight. I don't see those. The one I get is occasional elevated liver enzymes, but those are often patients who elevate liver enzymes to other nutraceuticals, and we just have to do one variable change with them and rerun their metabolic panel. In comparison with other meds used for treatment of the medical condition, CBD has a better side effect profile. This could improve patients' compliance and adherence to treatment. So this is wild. We're always like, yeah, that one patient who rose liver enzymes or whatever. When you look at prescriptions, which I'm not anti-prescription, but there are miracle drugs, there are raw Peter to pay Paul drugs, and there are drugs that should probably be off the market. And there are plenty of miracle drugs, but you're going to get the occasional side effect with some unique genetic makeup with any medicine, natural or prescriptive. So what this study is saying is CBD blows doors on safety profiles for prescriptions and has a very reasonable safety profile for nutraceuticals. Whereas CBD is not sedating, many CBD-containing drugs and hemp chemovars do display this liability. This is not attributable to CBD concentrations, but rather to the predominance of myrcene in high titer in many commercial varieties. Myrcene, a monoterpenoid, displays a prominent narcotic-like profile that is seemingly responsible for the couch-lock phenomenon, frequently associated with modern cannabis phenomenology. Selecting breeding of low myrcene chemovars reduces or eliminates this liability, yielding cannabis plants or extract that are more suitable to patients who must also work or study. So what we're saying here is you don't have to throw out hemp. We're just saying, as a clinician, I'm nervous about multiple phytocannabinoids and my autoimmune patients where we have lots of immune confusion and Th1, Th2. I want that pure cannabidiol isolate. But then also, if you have a patient that you're trying to sedate and they tolerate their full spectrum hemp, knock yourself out. That's great. But if you have someone who is super sensitive to THC, even a 0.3% THC in a full spectrum hemp might be too much for them. So I like pure cannabidiol because so many of my patients are immune confused, swinging in Th1, Th2, need that Th3 support, and are more chronic inflammatory people. During COVID, they did a study in Brazil on frontline workers. We're talking about the doctors and nurses who were in the frickin' trenches before we really said, hey, this is an average coronavirus, and if you treat the inflammation, you're not going to get nearly the COVID deaths we have. Don't go chasing the virus, chase the self-made inflammatory responses to the virus. It is our own immune system that burns down the lungs and drives TGF-beta1 and creates pulmonary fibrosis that creates upregulation of clotting genes and strokes and heart attacks and neuroinflames people and leaves them depressed and fatigued. So remember, it's not the virus, but our immune response to the virus. And CBD is very good at participating in calming any post-viral inflammation that you're dealing with. However, they were dealing specifically with the people who are working on the front lines, and they randomized these doctors and nurses into getting therapy and an exercise, DVD, old school, or therapy, DVD, and 300 milligrams of pure cannabidiol. And the CBD takers had statistically significant reduction in emotional exhaustion, burnout, anxiety, and depression. How cool is that? So if you're really under the gun in a work situation, or it's one of those weeks where you got to spend a week to get all your tax papers accomplished, that's where I might increase my personal usage of CBD. And I take about 75 to 150 milligram wellness dose a day. But on that kind of week, I might take 75 to 150 milligrams twice a day because I can really feel that burnout. And then I get that enthusiasm uplift. Yeah, let's go through charts. Yeah, let's get those tax papers together. So really neat study. So again, more on safety. And this is, again, talking about several studies suggesting CBD is non-toxic in non-transformed cells and does not induce changes on food intake, does not induce catalepsy, and does not affect physiological parameters on heart rate, blood pressure, and body temperature. It does not affect gastrointestinal transit and does not alter psychomotor or physiological functions. Chronic and high doses of up to 1,500 milligrams of CBD are reported well tolerated in human trials. So it gets expensive at that dose, and that's why the three major reasons I decided to sign on as Director of Research and Development at Blue Sky was purity and potency. We have third-party testing on every batch of our product line. And again, that's an independent verification to say we're within 10% of the milligram dosage. So a 30 milligram Sky Gel is going to be 27 to 33 milligrams for potency, but there's also no contaminants in there. You have pure cannabidiol and MCD, purity and potency. The second was cost effectiveness. There's not a company that I've come across that does a better per dollar per milligram of CBD. So once in a while, you have someone really pushing a 3,000 milligram hemp product, but only 500 milligrams of that is CBD. That's much more cost effective. We're talking per milligram and the value there. And then the other reason is I wanted a zero THC product, and I'm not pro criminalizing marijuana. It's just that a lot of our patients are looking for anti-inflammatory, uplifting productivity molecules. They're not looking to get intoxicated. And some patients are very sensitive to THC, and many of our patients are coming in with those mood disorders where THC is really contraindicated. And again, anxiety, obsessive compulsive, ruminating, bipolar, and schizophrenia are good candidates for CBD, not good candidates for marijuana. And if you have those people or those propensities and mood disorders in your family line, talk to little Timmy before he's going to college about, Uncle Frank's got bipolar and your aunt's schizophrenic, and you want to keep it mellow on the weed, or maybe just avoid it altogether. Go to the gym instead. Go party, hang out with your friends, but you don't need to smoke a joint to have a good time, and it might kick off some paranoia and some anxiety and some schizoaffective disorder. It's a huge problem with the higher concentration THCs in Boulder County right now. All right, so conversely, some studies reported that this cannabinoid can induce some side effects, including inhibition of drug metabolism, alterations in vitro cell viability, decreased fertilization capacity, and decreased activities of P-glycoprotein and other drug transporters. Based on recent advances in cannabinoid administration in humans, controlled CBD may be safe in human and animals. However, further studies need to be reported. So I brought this up because this is where they were hitting concerns with liver enzymes. Again, you're going to see less than 1% if you're truly tracking liver enzymes, and that's similar to other nutraceuticals. And in these clinical trials, they are heavy-handing a little mouse. So remember, chronic use in high doses of up to 1,500 milligrams are well tolerated. Now, again, that's usually cost prohibitive, and even clinically, I rarely go over 300 milligrams of cannabidiol in certain mood disorders or extreme pain. We can go up to 600, 900 in certain hospice situations. Metastasis to the bone, you can go up to 300 milligrams 3 times a day in someone who's just rolling in bone pain. We, one of our favorite customers who's not a patient, Tom, passed from bone metastasis, and he was like family. And the original and then the max relief was even better for his metastasized prostate cancer to the bone. And he's been very verbal and left us wonderful testimonials. But what was so wild as a guy who started in hospice is that morphine wasn't working for his bone pain, but the Blue Sky Max Relief was. And again, is that every hospice patient? I don't know. But if you've ever volunteered hospice and you see people rolling in pain, it is super meaningful to have something that helps when even your end stage morphine is not bringing that patient relief. And there is no contraindications of using max relief and morphine in a hospice patient. And obviously, it's really palliative care at that moment. So there are some reasons to not high dose CBD, and CBD and glaucoma. If you remember, President Bush Sr., he was on Marinol for his glaucoma. And THC is a better medicine for glaucoma. If you're going to do CBD, you want to keep it below 20 milligrams so that you don't enhance intraocular pressure on glaucoma. 40 milligrams causes a slight increase in intraocular pressure. So if you have a patient with intraocular pressure issues, high-dosing cannabidiol is contraindicated, and THC is indicated. But you might want to, if you have a THC with low-dose CBD, you might want to keep it below 20. In particular, daily doses above 20 milligrams is contraindicated for glaucoma patients, and that's well published. In regards to drug interactions, there are a handful of prescriptions that take the same clearance pathway as CBD, and when you have a nutraceutical and a prescription both taking the same clearance pathway, you threaten the chance to back up that drug, and have smaller doses accumulate more in the body. And the biggest one we see on that is the original blood thinning medications, warfarin, heparin, and Coumadin. It is rare that doctors are using those anymore. Everyone's using the new generation Xarelto and Pradaxa and Eliquis. And occasionally you'll find someone with a heart valve that's still on Coumadin, and there's a couple situations where someone doesn't tolerate the new generation. And if that's the story, you can track INR, which is vitamin K-dependent blood clotting drugs like Coumadin, warfarin, heparin. You can track an INR, and you can add CBD with prescriber and say, hey, are we getting too thin on the blood? Then you would back up on the Coumadin, warfarin, heparin with prescriber. So there's ways you can work around that, but just know the original blood clotting meds, Coumadin, warfarin, heparin, take a similar clearance pathway as CBD. There's a handful of other medicines. We don't see that often in our clinic. Some of the anti-seizure meds can interact. We talked about the warfarin, and then potential overlap with amiodarone, an arrhythmia drug, cyclosporine, dilacetam, fluconazole, which I just hate using azoles unless you have a documented blood culture fungal infection, haloperidol, sertraline, tetracyclic antibiotics, tacrolimus, and verapamil. So some of these mood meds might be things that you're going to see when you're working with mood disorders and the Blue Sky line. And what I do is, again, I have a good relationship with the psychiatrist. I will call and connect with them on certain things. And this usually means you can reduce prescriptive medication with the prescriber if you're getting benefit off cannabidiol. But that's always done as a team approach. Is CBD safe? And the answer is sort of. So buying CBD and full spectrum hemp products has been profoundly variable. CBS News had a really interesting story on fraudulent CBD company using synthetic compound called 4-CCB. This makes you feel something off a product that is not cannabidiol, and that's why you need to work with companies that use independent analysis through third-party verification for purity and potency, which is one of the reasons I feel so comfortable and happy at Blue Sky. And then the product containing no CBD, U.S. health officials arguing states to regulate marijuana oil extracts after investigating a rash of illness tied to products in Utah. In a report released Thursday, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention found that synthetic products falsely labeled as cannabidiol or CBD sickened as many as 52 people through October and January. So this is about 5 years old. And what I'm going to tell you is DHEA, the hormone, used to have a lot more concerns with purity and potency. As something's on the market, the free market will usually start to stop buying this nonsense. And then the companies that are sincere about third-party testing are the ones that last. But it's important that you verify wherever you're getting your cannabidiol and other isolates, CBG and CBN, are doing third-party independent verification of purity and potency. And then finally, this is kind of a funny but intense one, found that CBD was contaminated with cough syrup. And the whole point of that is they want to try and have the consumer feel some effect. But who wants to be on dextromethorphan? That's a cough medicine that can absolutely come with long-term side effects if you're taking it all the time. So this was an interesting study that came out of Penn Medicine in Pennsylvania and JAMA, and found that nearly 70% of all cannabidiol products sold online are either over or under labeled, causing potential serious harm to consumers. It's hard to go overboard with CBD, but the whole point was in that potency conversation, you want 30 milligrams to be 30 milligrams. You want 75 milligrams to be 75 milligrams so you can mimic what you're seeing in clinical trials and also keep things safe and wonderful. So studies have not shown that too much CBD can be harmful. Products containing either too little or too much CBD than labeled could negate potential clinical benefits to patients. And according to Von Miller, a number of products also contained a significant amount of THC, the chemical compound in cannabis, responsible for making a person feel high. So I had a buddy who basically got some bathtub gin hemp that his friend made in the bathroom, in the bathtub, and he called me and said, I'm on a walkabout. I'm stoned as hell off of this hemp product. And what basically happened is his friend was trying to make full spectrum hemp that was way high on THC concentrations, and he works in the banking system, and he had to leave his desk and go walk in the foothills for about 4 hours. Everything was okay. Guess what I told him to do? Take Blue Sky Original so that he could kick the THC off the CB1 receptor and come back down to earth and get moving on with his day. So what do we like about ethical products? We want third-party purity and potency. We want to know that every batch has a lot number that you can track as a certificate of analysis. Third-party tested for pesticides, third-party final batch tested for zero THC, and natural farming practices. So how much should I take? We talked a little bit about this, but on average, most people are going to do about 30 to 120 milligrams of CBD to show improvement in most things. A healthy CrossFitter might be 30 to 75 milligrams pre and post workout to really feel a little more enthusiastic and recover better, whereas people with severe cognitive issues respond from 30 to 800 milligrams, and the 800 milligrams is going to be more things like schizophrenia and an average stiff anxiety. A really strong anxiety is going to be about 300 milligrams a day. Most of our patients have been pre-treated with diet and lifestyle measures, high healthy fats to feed the endogenous cannabinoids, correction of apnea and blood sugar, and are already on omega-3 fish oils and vitamin D. Remember, if you have arrhythmia, you don't want to go more than 2,000 milligrams of EPA DHA fish oil. And if you have arrhythmia, it's best to work with a provider who knows fish oil. And I personally see a synergy between things like industrial seed oils out and anti-inflammatory EPA DHA fish oil up, and then adding the CBD. You'll also see synergy with things like the Mediterranean diet because you're getting the lousy oils out, you're getting the olive oil up, and you're going to feel better. So is CBD better than full spectrum? You can read this. I'm just going to tell you all the research is on cannabidiol. There's a handful of full spectrum hemp, and I'm just a man of God and science. So if I'm going to have a patient spend time, money, and energy on something, integrity is the key, and I want to see the data. And if the data is not there, then you have to use the art of medicine with maybe some cell line trials or some animal trials. But there is good human clinical studies out there on CBD and Parkinson's, CBD and MS, CBD and anxiety. And again, it's about bringing integrity to the dosing. Start small and go up. You know, some of our patients do need to get the 300 milligrams for some of those stiffer neuroinflammatory diseases. A lot of people feel great on 75 milligrams of CBD a day. And like shopping for high quality fish oil, you just have to know how to read labels. Make sure you're looking at the dosage in milligrams of cannabidiol if you're trying to match a human clinical trial, like 300 milligrams of cannabidiol for anxiety. It's not 300 milligrams of full spectrum hemp. So a lot of times in a 3,000 milligram bottle, full spectrum hemp, only 500 milligrams will be actually CBD isolate. So know what you're paying for, know how to read labels, make sure you're looking at serving size, purity and potency, third-party testing, all that good stuff. So unfortunately, cost is one of the bigger obstacles to CBD access at levels that produce therapeutic results. As an integral company tries to address this while having the most cost-effective milligrams of CBD per dollar on the market, while maintaining third-party testing for purity and potency and zero THC, we really deliver the most cost-effective, clean, pure product that I've seen on the market. In a recent interaction with a patient, I evaluated her full-spectrum extract product X, and it was 300 milligrams of oil, full-spectrum oil. Only 300 of those milligrams were labeled as CBD for $52. The high quality integrated integral brand showed 3,000 milligrams of tincture for 125. That's our Blue Sky Original. Product X requires 10 bottles or $520 to get to the same milligrams of CBD. Okay, so if we wanted to try and mimic 300 milligrams of CBD for anxiety, you would need one $52 bottle of the 3,000 milligram full spectrum. Now, maybe you'd respond nicely to the myrcene. And again, people are doing well on a full spectrum hemp, but we're not here to naysay other people. We're just following what's in the peer-reviewed literature on how to apply cannabidiol, and the medical papers aren't there for full spectrum. And then find that the company keeps overhead low and quality high. So if Blue Sky sponsored Michael Jordan, our products would have to go up threefold. And that's the whole point, is to keep a low overhead so that you can pass the savings on to the customer and the patient. Thank you for your time, and really looking forward to hearing more customer experience, more patient experience for what I've seen as the fastest, most effective natural medicine application that I've ever used for pain, sleep, and inflammation.